Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Pierce Hall at the historic Chicago Temple building. My name is Jamil Khoury, and I am the founding artistic director here at Silk Road Rising. It is with enormous pride that we are presenting this evening's program entitled Eastern Christians Commemorating Genocide, Confronting the Future. Just out of curiosity, who is here at Silk Road for the first time? Okay. Welcome. If I may say so, I think there is something poetic in a conversation about Eastern Christians taking place in a building that belongs to a community of Western Christians, the First United Methodist Church at the Chicago Temple. So yes, history does indeed talk. Organizing this panel has been an absolute labor of love. I am myself an Eastern Christian, having been raised in the Antiochian Orthodox Church of my Syrian-born father, and like so many gathered here this evening, I am deeply concerned about the future of Christian communities and of all faith communities throughout the Middle East and beyond. We are not seeking a Christian exit from the Middle East. Mass emigration is not the solution. We want Christians to remain in and return to the birthplaces of Christianity and to live in peace, safety, and prosperity. 2015 marks the centennial of what many historians have called the Christian Holocaust, the genocide of over 2 million Armenian, Assyrian, Chaldean, Syriac, and Greek Christians in what was then the Ottoman Turkish Empire. As we commemorate this painful centennial, we must also respond to entirely new threats being faced by the peoples of the region, namely the emergence of extremist movements such as ISIS, the so-called Islamic State, noted for its relentless, some would say genocidal, persecution of Christians, Yazidis, Shias, and Druze. I think it important to note that the majority of ISIS's victims are in fact Sunni Muslims, the very community that movement purports to represent. The peoples of the Middle East are today caught in an existential struggle between those who believe in pluralism and coexistence and those who do not. Will Christianity in the Middle East survive is one of the most commonly posed questions on news sites and in community forums these days. I would add a second interrelated question. Will pluralism and tolerance in the Middle East survive? When we talk about Eastern Christians, we are talking about the living descendants of the first Christians, the earliest Christians, and the churches that they established throughout the Near East, Asia Minor, and the Eastern Mediterranean. The Christians of Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Israel and Palestine, Jordan, Turkey, Armenia, and Iran. We are talking about a rich tapestry of Orthodox, Catholic, and Apostolic churches and small communities of Protestants comprising a magnificent canon of Armenian, Byzantine, Coptic, Latin, and Syriac rites. From Arab Orthodox Christians to the Assyrian Church of the East to Maronite and Melkite Catholics. And of course, the largest body of Eastern Christians live in Egypt, the vast majority of whom belong to the Coptic Orthodox Church. Eastern Christianity is a mosaic of ancient traditions that blend majesty with humility, mysticism with everyday life. Also, one more show of hands. Who here identifies as being from an Eastern Christian background? Just curious to see. Surely, the liturgical, spiritual, and aesthetic brilliance of the Eastern churches must never be lost. And yet the actual people who comprise these communities are literally struggling to stay alive. It is a dire situation, and it must be reversed. Eastern Christians need allies. We need Muslim allies. We need Christian allies. We need Jewish allies. We need allies of all backgrounds. Some of you may remember that Silk Road Rising produced the world premiere of Adriana Sevahn Nichols' play Night Over Erzinga in fall of 2012. It is a play that we had co-commissioned along with New York's Lark Play Development Center and San Francisco's Golden Thread Productions. I'm sorry, indulge me in one more show of hands. Who saw Night Over Erzinga? Just curious. Okay, and I will stop my polling now. It's just good information, it's good data. This past April, the Armenian translation of Night Over Erzinga premiered at the Yerevan State Youth Theater in Armenia. So at this point, we are going to present some excerpts from the play, directed by Corey Pond. I'd like to invite to the stage actors Ram Barkador, Catherine Dildilian, Sophia Menendian, Kaylin Strauss, and Isla Peck. And with no further ado, please enjoy these excerpts from Adriana Sevahn Nichols' Night Over Erzinga. Thank you.
I'm answering a blood call.
My blood call.
Memory can only be forgotten for so long.
Buried but so deep.
Until one day.
After the rains have loosened the earth.
Nature exhumes that which must be spoken and remembered.
Grandmother.
Grandfather.
I invoke you.
I want to know. Want to listen. Want to find the hidden pages of the story.
To fill in this gap. To pick up the lost stitch. To belong to you. And to Armenia.
Hi, Dad.
Hello, my dear.
Oh, you're frozen.
I'm okay. Just let me warm my hands a bit.
Would you like a cup of tea? I just made a fresh pot.
Yes, yes. I bring cognac. We can put it into the tea.
Oh, not for me, Dad. It tastes horrible.
Oh, it's good for your health, my daughter. It will warm you from your head to toes. It's too cold in here. You must complain to the landlord. Little bits. Little, come on.
Okay, just a drop.
How's Estrella doing?
She's quieter than usual. I think she's been worried about me. It's so hard not to cry in front of her. How did you do it, Dad? How did you keep going when everything fell apart?
Oh, my daughter. Too much. Too much.
Sometimes I get scared of unraveling just like Mother.
No, Agig. Don't you ever say this.
I keep seeing her scrubbing the kitchen floor that was never dirty over and over, screaming about a river of blood.
The blood. The blood, it's everywhere. I can't stop the blood. I try, but it won't stop the river. A river of blood is flowing right through this house, and it has come for us. Put the towels under the doors. Close the windows. Do it, Kachig! The river will take us! Take our family! Do it!
My child, she suffered so much.
Why was I so bad?
No, no.
After that night, she left the house in her nightgown. No matter how hard I tried to be good, to be quiet, she never recognized me again. How do you forget your own child?
My child, my daughter, it wasn't you. Your mother suffered because she couldn't protect her sister.
I have an aunt?
Yes, but she died when she was very young. Her name was Anushik.
What happened?
Your mother was 14 and very beautiful when the soldiers came. Her whole family was forced to join the hundreds of other Armenians driven from their homes, their villages.
We left the bread still baking in the tonnier, the clothes drying on the line. We thought we were coming back.
They were forced to walk all day in the scorching heat with no food, no water, no shoes. Under the cover of darkness, the beautiful girls would disappear. So her parents hid her, up to her neck.
In the cold night sand, I heard my father yelling with the soldiers. My mother took off her scarf and covered my face. It smelled of her. I imagined I was in my bed and she was sitting next to me saying prayers, as we always did before she kissed me goodnight. My father pleaded with the soldiers. No, she's just a child, please, no, my God, please, no. My parents hadn't buried my sister Anushik with me because...
She was only 8, and they thought she was too young to be of any interest to the soldiers.
The soldiers tried to take Anush while my parents held on to her. She screamed as she was being pulled in two. My mother ripped open her own dress, begging them to take her instead. One soldier held my father while another cut off my mother's head. My father vomited and they kicked him. He was shaking and crying and praying. They laughed as they held him down while three soldiers surrounded Anush. They ripped off her tattered dress and spread her legs open with their bayonets. My father screamed a sound I have never heard him make before. I held my breath, too afraid to make the fabric of my mother's scarf move. I held my breath. I wanted to shout, "Anush! Kick them! Bite them! You must fight!" But I just held my breath. I could see her legs. They trembled as each one took their turn on her with their bodies and their swords. And then, after a while, her legs just stopped moving. I lay there in that sandy grave for hours, days.
Her butchered family all around her. She could do nothing to help them. I refused to let her speak about the past because I was too afraid to bring that river of blood into my house. To think about what had happened to my own family. I thought we would drown.
What happened to your family?
We did not expect to have to do this so soon, but the signs are clear. You must temporarily leave us.
What?
We have secured a passage for you to go to America, to stay with your cousin Kavork in Massachusetts.
In America, I don't even know Cousin Kavork.
My son, our good Turkish friends have told us in confidence this is what is best.
No! My place is with all of you.
No, we cannot keep you safe here. The Turks are bold now. You see how they just come into our house?
That is why I should be here with you.
No, your father is right.
No, there is too much risk now that you are military age. My son, what we saw, what your mother endured while you were in her womb, I pray you will never know.
All the more reason for me not to leave you here alone and be oceans away, sick with worry. With Garina and Mama, Grandma, and Grandpa, you need another man in the house.
It is only temporary. When things quiet down, you will return to us.
And we will be waiting for you.
And we must make the sacrifice now that there might be a lifetime of birthdays and nights on the hill to come. And we will know our grandchildren, and that our good name will continue.
That is why I must stay here, to protect it.
No! No, there is no other way. I will arrange for Jamal to take you to Samsun tomorrow. I will fill your pockets with enough gold to ensure any bribes needed to get you there safely. You will take a ship from Samsun to Constantinople. From Constantinople, a ship to Marseille. From Marseille, a train to Normandy, and there you will find a ship to America. After you arrive in New York, you will take a train to Worcester, Massachusetts, where your dear cousin Kavork will be waiting for you. I give you this, my son. It will hold the hours and the days until we are together again.
What happened to your family?
I don't know. I had been in America for almost a year and a half, and one day the letters just stopped coming. I couldn't imagine what had happened, so I kept waiting. We began getting news about the deportations, and weeks later, articles started showing up in the New York Times about the massacres of villages being burnt to the ground. I refused to believe it. I kept waiting. Then one day, I read that the people from Erzinga had been taken up to the bridge of Kamal, tied together, and thrown into the Euphrates River. Something in me died that day so I could go on living. It had to. I worked in a slipper factory. We were paid by the piece, and I worked so hard and so fast so I didn't have a moment of stillness that I could think of what had happened. I saved everything I made. 10 years working. And when I met your mother, I thought I could save her too. I've never seen you here before.
This is my first time. I work for Mrs. Babajani and Son, so I had to say yes.
Oh, so you came to sing and dance against your will.
Sort of, yes.
I am Aravad Kachig Ogadania.
Oh, I am Alice Hajian.
Where are you from?
Southborough.
Before that.
Framingham.
Before that.
Troy, New York.
Alice Hajian, where were you born?
Shaban Karahisar.
Oh, that explains why you're so beautiful. I went there once with my father, and we were speechless at the sight of your village's lush valleys and purple mountains. However, with all due respect, I think my mountains are more beautiful.
Your mountains? Where are you from?
Erzinga.
Erzinga? There are no mountains that rival ours in Erzinga.
Alas, you are right, beautiful Alice. But you see, I was not referring to Erzinga. I was speaking of the mountains of Kiki, where the rushing brooks of melting snow sang all summer, while we danced under the stars with bellies full of ripe apricots, and the wanton sun refused to set for fear of missing the party.
Ardabat Ogadanian, you are a poet.
No, only when I'm inspired. Were I a zephyr, might I caress your bright brows, dream in sleep, breathe gently on your lips, and dry your tears if you should sleep.
Bedros Plurin?
My favorite poet.
Ardabat, I
give you this, my beautiful Alice. For my future is now in your hands. You will hold the sum of my hours and be the fruit of my days. But all of the things I tried to give her were not what she needed.
What did she need?
Did you make a mistake? Huh, Jimmy? Marrying the poor Armenian girl with the sad eyes who reminded you of home. The poor Armenian girl who can't give you a son.
We'll try again.
No, I can't. I told you, one is what I can manage.
Get a hold of yourself. I will not have Agag hearing this.
What, that her mother's womb is cursed?
Alice!
Alice! That's all you have to say. Alice, go back to the club. There's nothing left for you here in this stale, cold museum we call a home.
And why is it stale? Because you keep all the windows sealed shut like a tomb. Agag needs to breathe.
Agag needs to be safe.
Safe? From what, Alice? There are locks on the doors. Neighbors, police.
I have seen what men in uniforms do to little girls.
You leave this alone right now.
No, you sleep, passed out from your cognac, while I lie awake all night, hearing every sound, breath, footstep that passes over our heads and in front of our doors. They are always watching.
Who, Alice? For God's sakes, who? You live in a world of ghosts, but I will not live there with you. If you can't let the past die, then what good was it if to have survived?
And what do you know of survival? You got on a boat, came here with money in your pockets, and one day the letters just stopped coming. That is not survival. Survival is having to live in hell every day.
Shut your
Survival
mouth.
is watching girls get carried off every night by the soldiers. 8, 9, 10-year-old girls screaming while these barbarian Turk soldiers rape them all night and throw their bloody corpses back to their parents in the morning.
I forbid you to bring this poison into my house. Do you hear me? The past is the past.
If the past is the past, then why write all of these letters? You think you can hide them in this house and I won't hear them screaming?
Don't you touch
Do
those.
you think one day the doorbell is going to ring and your family is going to be standing there?
Leave them alone!
Several hundred Armenian villagers from Erzinga were marched up to the bridge of Kamal. The women and children were tied together and...
No! Don't.
The river has come. Can't you hear it? Right to our house. The river has come.
She needed to be free. She begged me to let her sing at the cozy corner, and all I can think of is the shame of what people will think of my wife. And then we have a daughter who wants to sing and dance. But you were different, because no matter how much I tried to keep you locked up, you found a way to be free. My child, I'm sorry. So sorry. Can you forgive me? I have something I want to give you. Close your eyes and open your hands. It belonged to your grandfather. It's a place to hold the song of your heart. It came all the way from my home, Erzinga, a long, long time ago. My father gave this to me to hold the hours and days until we were to be together again. I want you to have it now. Erzinga, a magical village where the stars would gather together at night and shine so bright no one was afraid of the dark. You can put this under your pillow, and when you listen to it ticking, you will know your family is with you, and you are safe. Close your eyes. I want you to imagine the most beautiful tree with its branches reaching to the sky. Can you see it? This is the wishing tree, the miracle tree, our family tree.
It is the one who remembers, the one who grows hope.
The wishing tree is what holds us up when we have lost our will to stand.
Its roots are eternal and nourished by our tears and our remembering.
The wishing tree's only real wish is
To
not be forgotten. My sweet child, if ever you feel afraid,
Or alone.
come to this tree and rest here.
Take a handkerchief
And tied to a branch,
And
hands.
make a wish.
Then walk around the tree 7 times and know that we are listening
Listening
and with you
with you.
With you.
always.
Thank you all so much for your work. I would now like to call to the stage our 5 panelists. Although I am identifying each panelist with their respective faith community, I am in no way implying that they are here to represent their entire faith tradition. Nairee Hagopian with the Armenian Apostolic Community. Dr. Kamal Ibrahim with the Coptic Orthodox Community. Dr. Nabil Houri with the Melkite Greek Catholic Community. Deacon George Courier from the Syriac Orthodox Community. And Dr. Khalil Mirar from the Sunni Muslim community. So the way the evening will work is I will begin by posing a series of questions to our panelists, and then we will open this up to questions from the panelists. So I will start with Nairee and Deacon George. This past April, we commemorated, once again, the centennial of the Armenian, Assyrian, Chaldean, Syriac, and Greek genocides. 100 years after these systematic mass killings began, how does the legacy of genocide continue to impact your communities, the Armenian and Syriac communities, respectively?
Before I begin, I just want to thank Silk Road Rising for putting this panel together and bringing to you the Armenian perspective of what's happening in the Middle East, and for commemorating the Armenian genocide. And the actors, you guys did a great job. Congratulations to you also. So the Armenian genocide has definitely had a major impact on us as a people. Being faced with race extinction, Armenians have always managed to overcome adversity because of our remarkable spirit and faith. Armenians are survivors, and that is empowering. We are a resilient people rising from tragedy to build homes and families in new lands like the Middle East, Europe, and North and South America. Our families learned new languages and became part of their new society while retaining their culture. However, with that said, we struggle every day. We struggle to come to terms with the past and what the fate of Armenians will be in the future, questioning why this happened to us. How can there be such evil in this world is a question we ask ourselves all the time. As generations go by, will we forget our history and our language? Will the diaspora be able to keep our traditions and hold on to our rich culture? 100 years have gone by, and there has been no justice, and because of that, we cannot have closure. We are still being victimized because of Turkey's denial of the atrocities of 1915. Denial keeps the genocide alive for us. Victims of the genocide are subject to a double killing. According to Ali Wiesel, Turkey's denial strives to kill the memory of the events. denial is the final phase of race extermination. Following the genocide, Armenians were subject to re-education under the rule of Kemal Atatürk, who reinvented Turkey into a secular and Western state. However, with this new Turkey did not include any aspect of the minority groups who survived the genocide and stayed. Atatürk basically reinvented history. He reversed the Turkish court's guilty verdict, which held the leaders of the Committee of Union and Progress responsible for the deaths against the Armenians. He denied that the genocide ever had taken place, and he Turkified everyone, whether you were of Turkish descent or not. People were not able to keep their names. Historical Armenian monuments were no longer owned by Armenians, and orphans were forcefully converted to Muslim and Turkified. Now, Armenians walking in the streets of Turkey see the perpetrators of the genocide glorified. Streets and monuments are named after Talat Pasha. History books contain incorrect facts about what took place, and our cultural heritage is being destroyed. Today, anyone who speaks of the genocide is arrested and jailed for insulting Turkishness. Survivors of the genocide suffered terribly. Postpartum stress disorder, anxiety, and internalizing their feelings were not uncommon. I know that my mom didn't want my grandfather to remember what happened to his family, so they didn't talk about it. My mother tells me that my great-grandfather was a village official, so he was one of the first to go. The remaining Armenians in the village were deported. While in the caravan, my deeply religious great-grandmother threw her Bible in the river so the gendarmes would not desecrate on it. Their final destination was a pit to be burned alive. My grandfather and his mother were in the bottom of the pit, and they miraculously survived. So the impact of the genocide has had a profound effect on me. I feel like I have an obligation to those martyrs, especially to my family. We have no family history prior to 1915. It's too late to ask my grandfather any questions because he is deceased. We don't have any stories that were passed on from generation to generation. So basically my family's bloody history or bloody story begins at 1915. So my history has strengthened my commitment for truth and justice for not only the Armenians, but for all genocide and for all atrocities that are happening in the world. There is the unfortunate reality that these horrific acts are actually happening today. As human beings, especially those of us living in this wonderful country where we have freedom of speech, we need to be the voice for the voiceless. So in conclusion, the legacy of the genocide is that we are survivors, but we have unresolved issues that prevent us from moving forward and take that next step, which is healing.
Yes. The year 2015 has been dedicated to the centennial commemoration of the Syriac genocide called Seyfu. Seyfu in the Syriac Aramaic means the sword, because our people were killed by the sword. So we call it the year of the sword, Seyfu. Seyfu was the most disgraceful, the ugliest of the 20th century. It was the ugliest crime of the 20th century. It was very destructive, and while our wounds still bleeding from 100 years ago, the killing, destruction, and deportation continue until this day. It was just last summer that our people were deported from Mosul, which is the biggest city of Iraq. Majority Syriac people live there. Ancient Nineveh, the capital of the old world. The Assyrian, the Chaldean, the Aramean. The land of our forefathers, we were kicked out of it. We were deported with our clothes only. And this has happened 100 years ago and is happening today again. We can never forget what our grandmother told us about what happened in Seyfu back in 1915. Actually, Seyfu started it in 1895 and it didn't end until 1924. But 1915 being the worst part of the genocide, so they picked 1915 as the year of the genocide, Seyfu. The impact continue on our people until this day. Our people are leaving our forefathers' homeland, our ancestor homeland. For thousands of years, we had to leave it. Our number is being decreased in Syria, Iraq, and Turkey. We were majority, now we are very small minority, and I'm afraid this minority might not even stay if the killing continue the way it is. This genocide, people, they ask us, how can we forget about the genocide? This genocide uprooted us from our homeland. 2/3 of our people were killed, were massacred, and the survivors were displaced all over the world. I guess I'm out of time, I'm sorry.
Oh, you have time.
I have time? Okay. The genocide uprooted us from our forefathers' homeland, the land of Keldo, Ashur, and Aram. Everyone knows the history of Mesopotamia. That's our homeland for thousands of years. And we were simply asked to leave with only our clothes on. And it's very hurting to see our Muslim brothers that we were good neighbors for so many years, that they are robbing their Christian neighbors and taking their Christian neighbors to be killed by the ISIS. I will have to stop here. I don't want to take too much time. Thank you.
I want to continue with Deacon George and Nairee in terms of justice. How can a semblance of justice be realized today for the living descendants of the genocide and for the families, the loved ones of those who were killed? What does justice look like to you?
Justice looks like, to me, first of all, the Ottoman Turk today have to admit that the genocide happened. Because as Nairee said, that they say it didn't happen, it was a wartime. It was not a wartime. They massacred our people. In the Tur Abdin and the Hakkari mountain area in the southeast Turkey, there were about 1 million Syriac people living in that part of the world. From the million, only 225,000 survived. More than 750,000 Syriac, Chaldean, Assyrian were massacred. More than 2/3 of our nation were killed in the genocide. The Turks are not admitting, they have to admit to that. They have to offer at least a public apology about what they did to our forefathers. They have to apologize to the victims and to the victims' descendants. They have to compensate our people for the suffering of over 100 years. They have to at least return our properties back to us. They're still keeping our properties and they want us to forget and forgive. We forgive from day one. Because I remember my grandmother, when she used to tell us the horrible stories of the genocide, Seifu, she always also said, we don't wish this for our enemy. That's Christianity. We don't wish what our eyes saw for our enemy, the suffering that they saw. The forgiveness was given from day one, but we can never forget what happened to our people. The Syriac people, suffering for over 100 years, they have to get their properties back. They have to get their churches, monasteries. They have to return our property back to us. They have to recognize us as the indigenous people of the land. That's our country for thousands of years. And we want recognition for that. And of course, we would like to see justice by promoting a pluralism, equality, and a freedom of religion. All of what happened to our people, we are not holding it against the Muslims. We just don't want it to happen to others ever again.
Yeah, I agree with Deacon George. I am hopeful that there will be justice one day. I'm not sure if it's going to be in our lifetime. We thought that it, maybe it could be this year because it was a centennial. But once what was considered the forgotten genocide seems to have taken center stage. So thanks to people like Jamil and Malik, Peter Balakian, Jeffrey Robertson, Amal Clooney, and organizations like the USC Shoah Foundation, and countless other people who have brought this genocide to the mainstream, I feel that our discussions are building momentum and moving from outside the internal Armenian community to having a global audience. And in my opinion, it seems the right time to begin discussions of reconciliation and reparations with Turkey. There are many forms of reparations, including giving back historic Armenia to the Armenians, which is Western Armenia, and financial settlements. But for purposes of our discussion today, I think, like Deacon George said, a good starting point would be for Turkey to actually come to terms with their history and acknowledge the fact that the Young Turk Party is guilty of genocide. And a nice way to begin the reconciliation process would be the immediate return of churches which were seized and confiscated by the Ottomans and modern-day Turkey.
Thank you so much. I do have to say, and not to make light of anything, but having my name and Amal Clooney in the same sentence, I really appreciate it. Dr. Kamal Ibrahim, how would you describe the state of Christian-Muslim relations in Egypt, and what would you identify as the greatest challenges and threats that are facing Egyptian Christians today?
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank you, Jamil, and the Silk Road Project to have this very well-attended function. It is timely and well needed. I would like to discuss 1400 years of history of Muslims and Christians in Egypt. But don't worry, I will not take the whole evening. It's only 3 minutes. Since the invasion of Egypt by the Arabs in the 7th century, there was always a conflict between Christian and Muslim living in the same land, but many periods passed by where they had a good tolerance to each other, good relation, and I like to mention just a recent one, the liberal period, which from 1919 up to 1952, there was very good period for tolerance and a good relation between both sides of the country. But through the history, there are other periods which was very, very bad for the Christians. And then we came to Nasser days, and Nasser system isolates the Copts from the political process completely. And that culminated later with Sadat days, where he allowed Muslim Brotherhood to flourish as a way to counter-effect the remaining communists from socialists from Nasser's days. But he did not recognize how they are militant in their behavior, culminated by killing him by their hand. So Mubarak came, and Mubarak's objective was to maintain his dynasty. So he opened the way for Salafism thinking or ideology to come to Egypt. Egyptians who went to Saudi Arabia to work came back bringing Wahhabi ideology. This is a very extreme fanatic ideology. He calls themselves Salafists. And not only they are bad toward the Christian, but even toward the moderate Muslims. They believe that ideology is the only way to go. The petrodollars helped a lot, putting a lot of money in Egypt to help Salafists in creating their own schools and systems and so on. And that continued till the end of Mubarak days, when we had the Arab Spring. But during this period, education was infiltrated by Salafism. Media was infiltrated. Education curriculum was full of hatred toward the Christians. Media was full of talks and shows against Christians. And the not allowing Copts to respond, because if you do that, you'll be slammed with blasphemy charges. When Arab Spring came in January 2011, Christians came out with the Muslims against Mubarak. And that's probably the first time where the Christians showed visible and proactive participation. And that continued with the moderate Muslims. We had a bad time with Morsi time, where Muslim Brotherhood took over the country, and the moderate Muslims, with the Christian, with everybody loving for democracy, came out on the street, 22 million people, in June 30th, 2013. And that was the pro-CC system we have now. What do we have now? We have a government which is willing and interested to have tolerance between both sides. But more important, we have the moderate Muslim and secular Muslims who are able to come out and talk and support Christian. My look for the future is I'm very optimistic that we will see the Christian and the moderate Muslim, secular Muslims working together, creating to change the country from inside into good secular country. Is this going to be in my lifetime? No. But I hope it will be soon and next generation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ibrahim. Dr. Nabil Houri, the Christian community in Lebanon arguably enjoys a greater degree of power and a status unlike that of any other Christian community in the region. How would you assess the situation for Christian Lebanese today, and what are the challenges facing Christians in Lebanon?
Indeed, the Christians of Lebanon have a different history and a different perspective generally on this whole issue of Christian-Muslim relations. While it's true that in the 19th century there were sectarian problems, they were mainly between the Maronite Christian community of the mountain, the northern mountains of Lebanon, against the Druze who lived in the southern portion of the Shuf Mountains. But those were often wars, raids, and counter-raids between the various villages, and massacres and counter-massacres. So the Christians gave as much as they received in that period of sectarian turmoil. Now, in the 20th century, the relations between the Druze and the Christian communities become much more harmonious and much more tending towards coexistence and political cooperation than anything else. In the 20th century, the Christians of Lebanon were different because they were the majority when the borders of Lebanon were drawn by the French. So the French mandate left the Christians a slight majority over Sunnis, Shia, and Druze communities in Lebanon. So that was number one. They were a majority. Number two, they had the protection of the French, who gave them a lot of advantages in forming the political system of Lebanon. And consequently, after that, they also had Western support, American support as well. But most importantly, what the Christians of Lebanon had was a political system called the National Pact. And they were co-founders with the other religious communities of that National Pact, which essentially apportioned political power and position according to religious sect. That way, every religious sect, not just Christian in general, but within the subdivisions of the Christian community, each community had a guaranteed share of political power, executive, legislature, judiciary. And that way, the various religious communities did not have to compete or fight with one another. They essentially, within each community, members of that community competed against one another for political position. The times of turmoil have been when the Christians, in fact, who ended up with the presidency of the republic and the generalship of the military, when they abused their own power, which they had in Lebanon, it caused a lot of turmoil and attacks against them. Now, in current times, the Christians do not act as one political community. There are two major power blocks in Lebanon, March 8 and March 14. March 8 is led by the predominantly Shia Hezbollah party, and 50% of the Christian community sides with them. And the other block is March 14, which is led by the Sunni Muslim Hariri family. And the other half of the Christian community is allied with that grouping. And so the question is not one of religious persecution or intolerance or warfare. It is very much political, and the Christians of various sects, Greek Catholic, Greek Orthodox, etc., each have maybe, they leave individual freedom to the individual Christian to belong to this party or that party. And many of them, in fact, historically, have belonged to radical left-wing parties. For example, the Communist Party of Lebanon was founded by a Lebanese Christian, and several other parties as well. I think in the end, it is this kind of political diffusion and political collaboration with other sects in Lebanon that has kept the Christian community apart perhaps from the other Christian communities in the region. And I would say that the Christians of Lebanon suffered less, much less. And although there's been a diaspora, there has always been a diaspora in Lebanon. And the Lebanese, whether Christian or Muslim, they leave the country and they start lives elsewhere, all over the world, but they always come back. They always leave roots in Lebanon and family in Lebanon. I have been in the US for over 40 years, since 1971. But I have family in Lebanon, and other than 10 years during the Civil War where I stayed out, I go back every year. And I think this is something that will continue regardless of the hard times that the whole region is going through. Not just the Christian communities, everybody in the Middle East is suffering.
Thank you so much, Dr. Khalil Marar. How would you assess the political dynamics in the region that today seem to be pitting some in the Sunni Muslim community against Christian, Shia, and other religious minorities?
Thank you very much. So, there's two thoughts that came into my head when I asked this question. And the first was that I wish I was like a theater performer so that I can, do a better job in terms of translating both my misgivings about what's taking place in the region, as well as the sheer amount of violence that's taking place between the various communities in the region. And the second thought that I had is that I would like to sort of put things in perspective as far as what genocide is, while addressing the question, the very important question that you have about Sunni Muslims and about Muslims more broadly. I want to start with the assumption that, and by the way, for full disclosure, I'm a Sunni Muslim practicing, maybe not. I'm not really sure what my practices are anymore. But I do try to, adhere to the faith of my parents and grandparents and so on and so forth, and the faith that's taught in the Quran. At the same time, I find myself being incapable of talking about the Quran in any way, shape, or form without looking at things like the Bible, right, the Old Testament and the New Testament, and without ultimately looking to my Christian brothers and sisters in the region, be they Arab, Syriac, or otherwise, for guidance about what it means to be, faithful, what it means to be faith-oriented, what it means to be religious ultimately. The real tragedy, I think, of what's taking in the Middle East is that you basically have, people of the book, as the Quran calls them, killing one another. Now, granted, the minorities in the region are facing plenty of persecution that every single panelist here is talking about. And I think that it would do us a disservice to talk about the persecution that's taking place, the real violence and persecution that's taking place in the region, as either Arabs or as Muslims. As Jamil pointed to earlier, very rightly so, ISIS has killed more Muslims than it has any other community, right? So that's really where we come to, confront this idea of genocide head on. We have to question what it means to engage in genocide at least from a political science standpoint, right? But I'm not going to bore you to death with political science any more than I'm bore you to death with history. Here's why what's taking place in the region matters. What's taking place in the region matters for two primary reasons, right? The first is that it's a horrendous humanitarian catastrophe. The second is that things that take place over there will afflict us over here, will affect us in some way, shape, or form over here. And I hope that we can bring about a peace in the region that not only involves, Sunnis or people speaking on behalf of Sunnis, but people speaking on behalf of themselves as human beings first and foremost, that will recoil in horror about the real crimes that have been committed, both against their communities and against the communities that they see as the other. Thank you very much.
I'm now going to pose some all-group questions, we sort of discussed beforehand that everyone, those who are feel compelled to answer a question, to jump in and feel free to address what you're most comfortable with. It's been well documented that the 2003 U.S. invasion of Iraq had a devastating impact on the Christian communities in Iraq. So how would you interpret the impact of the U.S. invasion and occupation on this sort of exodus that occurred of Christian communities during the 2003 and the years that followed? Yes.
Thank you, Jamil. At the time of when the English were occupying Iraq, our Assyrian people in the town of Semel in 1933, where we had another genocide back in 1933 in Iraq, and that was the result of the English occupation because some of our Muslim brothers in the region, they get to mix up the Christian of Middle East with the West. To them, English, French, American mean Christian. So if any of those countries do anything to the Arab world, to the Muslim world, the Muslim have the right to fight back. Who? Fight the local Christian. Now, also recently, as we see the result of what happened in Mosul, in the Nineveh plain, where our people were deported, they were massacred, they were beheaded, simply because the Muslims feel that's a Muslim land and the Christians have no place on their land. Now the question is, when did this land become a Muslim land and the Christians are strangers? Unfortunately, some of our Muslim brothers in the region, they seem to believe that we are the descendant of the Crusaders. We have nothing to do with the Crusaders. We are the local people. We are the indigenous people of the land. That's our homeland for thousands of years. And we are not willing just to leave it. If we leave it, we're going to leave it just for a while, and we're going to go back to it. And I think it has a lot to do with the American occupying Iraq. The suffering of the Christian has something to do with that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'd like to disagree with this point of view. There are lots of generalizations in what you just said, George, that are not true. The U.S. invasion and occupation of Iraq essentially unleashed the majority in the country, which is Shia. When the Shia majority assumed power or the majority of seats in government, their, if you want to say persecution, oppression, was directed at the Sunni community of Iraq, not at the Christians. Let's not generalize and say the Muslims victimized the Christians because of the Western invasion. It is only ISIL, the so-called Organization of the Islamic State, which has attacked Christians and other minorities, by the way, not just the Christians. And for them, this is a small, radical, crazy group that has gotten a lot of power all of a sudden. But there's no way that you can generalize from that to saying Muslims in general took revenge because of the U.S. invasion against Christians. This did not occur. I was in Iraq in 2003. I was there twice after that. I followed the situation very carefully, and you cannot sort of generalize Muslim against Christians. And by the way, ISIL's, the first group of enemies for them is the Shia community. And then after that, others, there's a ladder of communities that they do not like. But primarily, it's the Shia that they hate.
I'm sorry. Can I answer now? I'm sorry.
No.
I didn't mean to generalize. I apologize. I have to agree with you. I didn't mean to generalize, but I have also to add to it that the truth is only a small percentage of the Muslims think and feel the way I just described. Very small percentage. However, unfortunately, the big percentage of the Muslims have not shown opposing what's going on in the area. Now, I know the big conflict is between Sunni and Shia, but our Christian, they have nothing to do with this side or the other side, but they take in the suffering.
Well, that's the wrong approach. I mean, they should be citizens of whatever country they're in and not think of themselves as separate from what's going on. If the Sunni and Shia are fighting each other in a country, the Christians as citizens of that country are concerned, involved, and they should be helping resolve rather than say, it's none of our business, we don't want to be hurt by either side. This is sectarian thinking, and I think this invites persecution when you think that.
So, Dr. Kamal.
Yeah, I would like to step in and not to look at it as Muslim massacre or discriminating the Christian. I would like to tell you, go down to the ground. And I can tell you what happened in the villages in Egypt. Muslims by nature are good people, neighbors to Christian. They go Friday to the mosque. They hear one of those militant Salafist imam instigating them against those Christian infidels living between you with a militant language, emotion, hot weather. Everybody will get out and burn the church or kill a family or push them out of the city. So that what you're talking about is not an organized system of Sunni destroying all Christian of Iraq. It is go down to the village and depend about who is instigating the poor, ignorant people.
So we will move on. Thank you all so much. Numerous articles, actually I jumped one ahead. ISIS, which obviously we just referenced. How would you describe the key factors leading to the creation of this phenomena? And why is ISIS specifically targeting the communities that they're targeting? What is either the theological or political? And I realize we touched on some of that already, but what do you see? You know, we hear a lot about like destruction of artifacts and of antiquity. But we also hear a lot that ISIS is very much involved in the trade of antiquity and in the excavation of archaeological sites. So clearly there's a duality there, and I'd like to speak to sort of the political impetus behind this movement.
Are you starting me or?
It's really for everyone.
Well, look, I mean, you know, I think that the points that Nabil is making are very good ones, you know, but I would revise them in the following way. It's not that ISIS targets Shiites first and foremost. It's that the biggest victims of ISIS have been Sunni Muslims that basically refuse to hack it. They refuse to toe the line that ISIS wants them to toe. And look, here's the thing. It's very nice to be in this country as a Muslim American, right, who's sitting up here and telling everybody how horrendous of crimes are being committed against my Christian brothers and sisters and others in the Middle East by Muslims, right? I can do that here because we have the luxury of like freedom and dissent and stuff like that. People in Iraq don't, right? I mean, ISIS has made it very clear, right? To use an old line from George W. Bush, you're either with us or against us. So anybody that dares to speak out against the horrible atrocities that are taking place against Christians will basically be massacred and has been massacred by ISIS. I mean, these guys don't mess around. They're brutal. They are engaged in everything that you're hearing about. But I would add the caveat that they're engaged in it against people, first and foremost, that refuse to toe the line that they should be towing according to ISIS. Sunni Muslims that are supposed to be ISIS-oriented, instead they're basically standing against ISIS with the Iraqi government and with their Shiite and Christian and Jewish brothers and sisters in Iraq as well as in Syria. Those people are being massacred as well. We have to talk about that. I don't want to call it genocide, but we have to talk about that massacre as well.
Okay. I think first of all we need to remember a very clear fact. Over 250,000 casualties, people killed in Syria in the 4-year war that we've seen there. Very few of these are Christians or other minorities. They're Muslims. And they are being killed by a barbarous regime in Syria. And they are being killed by a barbarous group of radicals called ISIL. So the majority, again, of this war are Muslims. The majority of people killed in Iraq over the last 10 years are Muslim. We have an ongoing war in Yemen. So far, 4 months, 3,000 people roughly killed, all Muslim. So what's going on in the region is not about Christianity, even though the Christians as a minority do suffer from it. But everybody in the region suffers from a transition which has only just begun. It's a revolutionary period that the Middle East is going through, and you have dictators, you have militant groups of various shades, you have power vacuum, you have extremism, and all that turmoil consumes everybody. It's about the birth of democracy, which may be decades before it finally comes. Europe went through 300 years before their democracy was set. So let's not exaggerate and focus on what the real problems are in the region.
But you know, Nabil, I do want to add one thing there. You know, whether Christians, and particularly in the Iraq case, were being specifically targeted as Christians or fleeing because they were caught between a Shia-Sunni civil war or insurrection, or however you want to, the numbers speak a very dramatic story in terms of a community that was 1.5 million before 2003 and is today possibly 300,000. So why that sort of exodus took place, you know, I think there are any number of factors on the ground, but Iraqi Christianity in particular has been dealt a very severe blow.
Yeah. Well, I mean, think of it positively in that many of these people do have somewhere to go and do have the assistance of the West, let's be frank about it. There's a lot of sympathy for them, and therefore they get assistance. But the general Shia community in Iraq is not out to get the Christians, nor is the general Sunni community. It's these small radical groups that do that.
Oh, I just wanted to comment. You know, most of the people do get help, I agree. But I just want to make it a point that, you know, the Armenians that have been in the Middle East have been there for 100 years. You know, they're losing everything. I mean, if you take them out of their homeland or their home, you know, we have Armenia as our homeland, but this is our other home. You know, these people are, the psychological impact I think it's going to leave on these people is terrible. I mean, their dignity is gone. They're taken out of their homes. You know, they have companies, they're doctors, engineers, teachers. You know, they've just picked up, they've left everything, and they've gone. I mean, it's really difficult for people that have left their homes. I just wanted to make that point.
Yes.
I have to disagree with Dr. Nabil about the way he blamed what's going on in the 4 years war in Syria, blaming the government. The truth, what's going on in Syria, Dr. Nabil, is we have extremist Muslims coming from all over the world fighting in Syria. And this is now very clear. Maybe it was not clear in the beginning of the war, but I believe it is very clear now that we have a group of extremist Muslims being supported by big power countries. We don't want to get into that, but they get their support, their money, their weapon, everything to go fight in Syria and Iraq. Those are not to be blamed on the Muslim. It's not a situation of a Muslim and Shia and a Christian. I think the trouble in the Middle East is coming from the outside, and those Muslim fighters are not the freedom fighters as you want to make them look like and blaming the government.
I never used that word, freedom.
Sorry?
I never used that phrase.
No, but you blame the Syrian government. The Syrian government, the Christian can speak, all of them, Armenian, Syriac, everybody know that the Syrian government has not killed any Christian or Muslim. The killers are coming from the outside.
The people who are dropping these barrel bombs on high-rise buildings are...
We're talking about people coming from as far as Chechnya, from Georgia, from China, from Saudi Arabia.
The people who are dying are the civilians, the majority.
Who are killing the civilian are those terrorist groups that, motivated by the sheikh, like Dr. Kamal mentioned earlier. The Muslims are good people. We have nothing against the Muslim brothers. However, one sheikh can preach in the masjid Friday, and there you go. Next day, thousands of people are getting killed, churches are getting burned. So,
yeah, I just like to make two remarks. One, we cannot keep saying the Muslims are the majority who are killed in ISIS, in Iraq, in Syria, and whatever, because it is the nature of statistics. The majority are Muslims. So even if they kill less in Muslim, it look bigger number than Christian killed. So we cannot take that argument. The argument is there is a systemic process of discrimination and persecution for Christian in Iraq, and especially under ISIS. Now nobody can deny that. And ISIS bringing their ideology from the Wahhabi of Saudi Arabia. And that ideology is as bad to Christian as bad to moderate Muslims. And that same Wahhabi ideology is supported by the government of Saudi Arabia, which are friends to American, and we support them. And same time, we send the plane to attack ISIS. It doesn't make sense. If we're fighting ISIS, we should tell the Saudi Arabia to stop giving money to ISIS.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
So this segues to the next question. There has occasionally in various points of the 20th century, there's been talk, and of course the 21st century, about a Christian state or a Christian homeland, somehow akin to the Jewish state project that we see in Israel, or autonomous regions of some sort, some kind of confederal, autonomous self-governance. So geopolitically speaking, how realistic or not are such, would such an endeavor be, or such endeavors be?
I'd like to jump in.
I will.
And I follow.
Thank you. Yes, our Eastern Christian do need either a state of their own in the Middle East or an autonomous regions in various places, simply because in some area, I don't want to say in the whole region of Middle East, but in some area in particular like Iraq and Mosul, our Christian brothers in Mosul has lost their trust in the Muslim brothers. They do not trust to live in peace with the Muslims. They can't see that happen. Now, in cases like that, I would say, yes, our people, like the Assyrian, Syriac, Chaldean communities in that area of Nineveh Plain and the surrounding villages, they do need a safe haven. These people are getting massacred. They've been kicked out of their homeland. They need a safer place. Safety comes first. So I would say, yes, we do need a safe haven for our people. We need to protect them. We need to preserve Christianity in the Middle East. And not in all areas. For Syria, for example, I don't think we have the same problem like we do in Iraq. It is different in Syria. But in Iraq is a must for the Nineveh Plain. I would say that.
Yes, we can sit here and talk about utopia from today till tomorrow, but there is no utopia. The Christian of Middle East, and I will talk about Copts, we are pharaonic people. We have a history of 7,000 years. The Copts, or the Christianity was there before Muslims. Muslim came and some converted, majority converted to Islam, but still we have the same roots. We love our land. We are attached to the land, and there is no way you can pull us away. So, and we also widespread all over Egypt, and the same in Iraq and Syria. There is no village or town called Christian and another town Muslim. It's everybody living together. So even logistically, I don't see that can be happen. And I have one simple example to give you. We have a huge diaspora from all Middle East, either in US, Australia, Europe, everywhere. And many of us, we don't have any family left in Egypt. Why? We love Egypt and we go back every year. And we wanted to go back to our old churches, old monasteries, old life, to look at it. We have a heritage and will not leave it, and I don't think that will ever happen to have a separate country for Christian or Middle East.
Great.
I can say a lot of things, but
okay. So at this point, I'd like to open this to questions from you, the audience. I see some hands jumping up. Marie?
What I was wondering about ISIS seems to be that is in Islam, or seems to represent an Islam that I don't think the Prophet would recognize. I think there are a lot of angry people that have sort of a generalized anger that makes them want to kill and to strafe, and it just happens that they are Muslims, or that they think they are Muslims, because I very often feel they aren't. To burn people in cages, all of these things, the Prophet came with a message of peace. And this is not representing Islam as far as I can see it.
Look, the ideology, I mean, ISIL, there is some method to their madness, as they say. They have a jihadi Salafist view of Islam. And I agree with you. I mean, though I'm a Christian, I'm also a Muslim scholar. I've studied Islam when I teach the Middle East and analyze the Middle East. Islam is a big part of that fabric. And I don't recognize their jihadi Salafism as a genuine Islamic
But I
religion.
also don't recognize it in the Saudis. The Prophet did not keep women down and infantilize as the Wahhabis do. I find it an embarrassment.
Let me answer this one sentence. What Saudi doing is using Islam for political reasons, using Islam to stay in power by allowing Wahhabis to do whatever they want, give them the money, but leave us in power. So that in return,
Yes.
Wahhabis using it politically to spread whatever extreme ideology. Neither you or any moderate Muslim around here will agree about their ideology. And if you take a vote for Muslims around the world, not many, you will not find except minority believe in that ideology. But the petrodollar was very effective in spreading the word.
This gentleman back. Thank you.
Yes. I'd like to address my question in particular to the gentleman with the Lebanese background and the gentleman from the Sunni Muslim world.
Yeah.
I'd like to know, in your opinion, and I am asking you to speculate a little bit here, do you think that the writings and ideas of Sayyid Qutb have played any significant role in shaping the views of the ISIS leadership, even if they have taken his views and warped them or twisted them? Do you think nonetheless that Sayyid Qutb's books, ideas, etc., have come to play some role in the worldview or attitudes of the ISIS leadership?
You want us to start in that order? Nabil and then me? Okay.
I think the answer is yes, some. Sayyid Qutb's writing is very Salafi, a very conservative way of establishing, a very literal way of understanding Islam. But actually, ISIL people have gone way beyond Sayyid Qutb, and for them, he is a marginal figure, an ancestral figure. Their ideas are, these people are, to the extent that they are really sincere about what they feel is religion, they are stuck in the 7th century. I mentioned the Shia conflict for them. Many of them are still fighting the original battles of the 7th century over the caliphate. And they feel very passionately that the Shia distorted Islam. And so they are number one on their enemy list. They are also after the Sunnis who do not conform to their way of interpreting Islam. There have been conservative thinkers and reformist thinkers in Islam, especially in Egypt, Muhammad Abdu, on to others who came after him. All these scholars would be considered almost, certainly irrelevant, but almost heretic by the ISIL people. These people are really far out.
And I would say that, you know, Sayyid Qutb is probably one of the most like blockbuster names, but I wish ISIL actually subscribed more to Sayyid Qutb, because the way that he imagined a political order was much more orderly, right, order-oriented than ISIS is engaged in. But really, we have, I don't think that we can just basically like engage in like, you know, like author determinism, where, you know, this author is responsible for this, or this author is responsible for that. I mean, if you really want to figure out what ISIS is up to, you should read this book, I can give you the name of it, that literally talks about the most savage stage that Muslims are going to be evolving through. That's really the sort of theoretician that has influenced ISIS the most. And I would add to it that, especially for those of us that say, you know, Islam is a religion of peace, Islam is just like any other religion. Religion's responsible for all kinds of crap, like deadly, violent, nasty stuff, right? So anybody who says, well, Islam is a religion of peace, I'd love to agree with you because I'm a peaceful person. I know I don't, maybe like I'm not conveying that right now, but I swear to you, like every religion is horrible, is guilty of horrible atrocities, right? And I'm not just talking about the Crusades and like ISIS. I'm talking about like all kinds of religious nonsense that has taken place in the name of God. Many people have been killed as a result of God, right? Even though whatever God it is, right? She is, he is, would not want us to kill each other, I would hope. Otherwise, that's not a God that I would want to pray to.
Thank you. Well, it's obviously extremism is the problem in all religions since day one. Since Cain hit Abel. You know, it's just been like that. And that's just something the people on this planet have just got to realize that, you know, we're all brothers and sisters. We all need to get along. Everybody wants a house. Everybody wants a job. Everybody wants peace. And if you want to praise God, that's fine. But that's how we all feel. And I don't think it's, if we can rally against a dentist shooting a lion, that guy's having a bad day, by the way. We can do the same for the persecutions of the Armenians, of the Egyptians. And nobody ever mentioned how Syria right now has actually got more refugees from the Iraq war and their own war than anywhere in the world. And Mr. Assad, you know, he has a bad day every day because with that country's ready to burst. But you don't hear about that. You hear about the little fights with ISIS and this and that, but the worldwide, you know, the internet's going to save the world. I got children, and I honestly believe it. They're going to talk to each other because they can. And Kuwaiti kids talk to Lebanese kids, and Lebanese kids talk to kids in Brazil, and the world's connected. And we can get, you know, I'm an old hippie. We, you know, had a revolution in the 60s. A lot of my brothers got shot at Kent State. My brother got killed in the Vietnam War. So, you know, our country has its own stuff. But I just believe that everybody knows deep in their heart that the extremism of all religions is the problem. It's not the government and this and that. It's the unpoliced radicals that are causing all the trouble, wherever they come, and they're coming from everywhere. You're not wrong on that at all. But that's because extremism is everywhere. That's what the houses we have to clean. That's just my view.
I was born in Syria, a country almost 80% Sunni and 11% Shiite and 9% Christian. I went to school in Syria, a college which was dominated by the Orthodox Church. Many of our children were Muslim. Many of my friends were Muslim. When I go to Syria, I see as many Muslim friends and I see Christian friends. The problem is not Islam and Christianity. The problem is the colonies. We were colonies by French, by England, by several states, by several countries. They created the division. I know in Syria every time there's a crime, either some Christian killing a Muslim or Alawite or vice versa. They were creating an atmosphere of hate and fear, and we're still paying for it till now. The only solution we have right now is to get together, work together, and stop dividing who is going to own what, because this is not going to happen. We cannot establish a Christian community in Syria alone because they are divided all over. Same thing in Lebanon, same thing in Iran. Our solution is to have leadership in the Middle East, which we are missing, that it's not working for the public, it's working for their pocket. Thank you.
Islam had them,
Yes. A two-part question.
Is that you or me? I was raising my hand too.
Go
ahead.
This gentleman, and then you and I.
I'm next, okay.
It's my understanding that due to the extreme Salafist nature of ISIL, that they pose a more existential threat to Saudi Arabia than should be supposed. And two, because of the actual declaration of the caliphate and the control of a region and the land, it gives them a great deal of legitimacy in, well, I should say the Muslim community. Or any opinions on that?
No, I actually, that's a fantastic point, right? And that is that Saudi Arabia is playing with fire, right? And they've always been playing with fire. And their first adversary was not just, Al-Qaeda, it was the Wahhabis of old that basically sought to create as much havoc as possible so that they can get their paws into Saudi governance, right? I mean, people are, I have two beliefs, right? People are like power hungry, like psychos, right, on one hand, and the other hand, like the self-proclaimed hippie brother in arms, and your point of view are absolutely right on, right? I mean, people generally speaking want to belong, right? We can't act as if, oh, if only we can get along, right? I mean, like the guy that got beaten by the LA police, what's his name? Rodney King, right? Said, I wish we could all get along, right? But the reality is that there's a legacy of racism that exists in this country that does not allow black folks to get along because they're not left alone. And I would say that it's very similar in the Middle East. People cannot get along because of not just the legacy of colonialism, right? I don't think that these problems came to the Middle East from like out there, right? And I wish I could believe that, especially being an Arab. I wish I could believe all of our problems are like somebody else's issues, right? Somebody else brought them to us, right? It was Islam, damn it, those Muslims, right? It was a colonialist, the colonists that brought them to us. I wish it was that simple. We had our own problems long before colonialism. Heck, long before Islam. Islam came about and there was like slavery and like infanticide and stuff like that. There was like child marriages. Now, there's still infanticide and child marriages and slavery now. It's just that at least Islam says, don't do that, right? As does Christianity, as does Judaism. I don't want to be construed as somebody who's basically hating on religion. I like religion insofar as religion allows us to coexist. But too often that religious difference has basically been sparked by those with real interests, right? By those that basically have an agenda to hate one another instead of coexisting with one another. Before we talk about coexistence, we have to talk about the trouble at hand. This region is literally in a catastrophe that needs to be resolved, first and foremost by people there, right? But I'm glad that there's enough of an audience here to have a hearing about what's taking place there. And I think that the most just way to talk about the injustices in the Middle East is to talk about it as they exist amongst all communities, right? Muslims, Christians, Syriac, Palestinians, and so on. Thank you.
I agree, and I think that with all due respect to Brother George here, the solution is not isolationism for the Christian community or any other community. The solution is in democracy, is in modernization. States, nation-states have to strive towards that, not go backwards to cantons of each religious sect living by itself. That is a formula for disaster in the Middle East. It won't be, in the short run, it won't look good. But in the long run, that's the only thing that will guarantee you that you're not persecuted, is your democratic and human rights. And by the way, the democratic and human rights of your brothers and sisters, regardless of what community they come from.
He's talking about the human right. I have to say something here. What a human right are we talking about these days? What a human right? We see people burning alive, people buried alive. I don't hear anybody talking about a human right. We're not here suggesting to isolate Christian from Muslim, because it's not going to happen. But we are suggesting to preserve and protect the Christian. So in situation like Iraq, the name of a plane, yes, it is a solution, Mr. Nabil. It is a solution to provide safe haven for these people, to preserve those people first before you build democracy. Democracy in Middle East, I'm sorry, Doctor. Democracy in Middle East is going to take long time. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be mean to my Muslim brother here, but we talk about religion, all religion do killing and all this. No, all religion are not the same. When we talk about religion, we should talk about the teaching of the religion. We're not talking about the people, what religion they are. I have many Muslim friends. I don't have nothing against Muslims, but I do have a lot against the teaching of some Muslim. Like Dr. Kamal said, the Salafi, the Saudi Islam is different than the rest of the Muslims. But we do have to protect our Christian people. What they are facing, the persecution is they facing in Iraq, there is no democracy to save them. Where is the democracy saving them? They are displaced, they're sleeping on mud, Dr. Nabil. I'm sorry.
You know, Jamil, this is how bad it's gotten in the Middle East, is that we're basically forced to choose between democracy on the one hand, right, and protection on the other hand. That's what like 20 million Egyptians took the streets for, right? The same people that went out in January 2011 and brought down one of the worst dictatorships that's ever existed in the region, in Egypt, under Mubarak, are the same people that went out and basically brought it back in. Except the guy is no longer Mubarak anymore. It's Sisi. I mean, this will probably get me banned from Egypt ever again if it doesn't democratize, right? But if we're going to wait for democracy to evolve, right, it's really disturbing that to be safe means to have no democracy. Muslim Brotherhood got elected. The Muslim Brotherhood should have been unseated, and I can't stand the Muslim Brotherhood, by the way, right? But should have been unseated through a democratic process, not through the military. The same military that was forced out, the goons that were governing the country under Mubarak.
I completely agree.
And Assad, my God, like another military regime. Talk about another military regime, right? A regime that basically governs with an iron fist. And it's really telling, by the way, that my people, the Palestinians in Syria, support the Assad regime because they value their safety much more than they value their voice. The people in Syria, whether Christian, Jewish, whatever they might be, whatever language they might be, support the Assad regime because they prize safety above all else. They prize safety above democracy. That's how bad it's become. It's a choice between safety and democracy. God help us all.
But if you have no life, democracy doesn't matter anymore.
Right.
So you first have to have safety before you can have democracy.
Sad state of affairs, sister.
I wanted Dr. Ibrahim and then the gentleman in the back has been waiting to ask a question.
Just a very quick note that we cannot sit here in a nice air-conditioned room and discuss democracy in the Middle East after we had 200 years here to get democracy. We did not get it till the civil rights movement of the 60s when the black got the rights. 200 years to build democracy. More than 300 years in Europe to get democracy. You want to do it only by word from President Bush. Go in, create democracy in Iraq. And now you have Sisi, and America does against Sisi because they try to get stability in
They're
Egypt.
in bed with him. What do you mean they're against us?
Well, I guess if you know something about Obama more than me, I'd appreciate if you can say it.
Yes.
No, he's in bed with Muslim Brotherhood.
I'm a big critic of Obama, but you can't blame that on him. Egypt just got a big installment of F-16s and
the gentleman in the back
Abrams tanks.
trying to speak.
My name is Emmanuel. I was born in Syria. I came in 1979 here. I went back 4 times to Syria. Now, I have 2 points to make. First of all, somebody drew a picture in Denmark, and thousands of Muslims went to the streets and started to burn and demolish buildings and places. 315 Christians were kidnapped from 2 villages in Syria 5 months ago, George. We didn't see any Muslim go to the street and demonstrate against that. Why are the majority of the Muslims in the world silent for whatever ISIS are doing, for whatever Boko Haram is doing? ISIS don't represent Islam, I agree with you. Why don't you protest against that? Why don't you voice it?
I'm trying.
That's one. I went back to Syria in 2011. When I came back in 1979, 30% of the Syrian Muslims, they were wearing the hijab, whatever you call it. I went back in 2011. There were about 50% of the women wearing hijab. Where is that modernization that comes with time? I didn't see it. That was my question. I mean, if Dr. Mirar, if you can answer that, if Dr. Khouri,
yeah,
I'm from that part of the world too.
Oh, you're right. You're right.
And I lived there, you know. I came here as an adult.
Yeah.
And there's another thing, I'm sorry, you know. What about the Constitution? Most of the constitutions in those Muslim countries are derived from the Sharia.
From the Quran.
I'm a Christian, and you know it, guys. I'm a Christian. I was living in Syria. If I fall in love, if I fall in real love with a Muslim girl, I should be converted if I want to marry her. Now, vice versa. If a Muslim guy falls in love with a Christian woman, he wants to marry her, she should be converted.
No, she doesn't.
I'm sorry?
Yes, she is.
Yes, she is. Check the Constitution. Yes. Yes. In Egypt, maybe the same thing in Egypt.
What are you talking about? Yes, it is.
You're right. I mean, both sides are right.
I mean, you are scholars, you should know that. Some of you.
Look,
yeah, well, if you want a scholarly discussion,
I'm just a janitor in one of these
you can listen and we'll explain to you. But I don't
It's
think
in Quran, Mr. Nabi. It's in Quran. Anybody married Muslim,
not in Lebanon.
Convert.
Not in Lebanon. I agree with that. But in Syria, Yemen, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, name it. Name all those Muslim countries.
Who would like to respond?
That's the right response.
Oh, I can respond. I remember. Yeah, you're talking about demonstration when the Christians were killed or kidnapped or whatever. And I think we have to look more into the logistics of demonstration. You need a leader to lead. And in the according to my knowledge, in the Sunni Islam, there is no clergy. And the only leader available there is the imam in the mosque. So, if imam in the mosque in Denmark, in Copenhagen, instigated the people to go out and burn and kill, they will go out. But if there is no imam to push the Muslims in the mosque to go out and support or criticize the kidnapping of 315, nobody will go out. There is no leadership. It's not like a church where our Pope will tell all the people, go out tomorrow morning as we did in the 70s and be in the street because they killed 25 people in a small town in Egypt, and all Christians went out with the priests complaining about it, called Zawi Hamra. I don't think in Islam they have the same kind of organization. And I think that's probably the main reason you don't see moderate Muslims out in the street. And you can correct me if I'm wrong.
I agree with you, but I call that, or they call that, whatever that Imam says, he calls it jihad. And it's in the heart of Islam, you know, in the Quran itself. He calls it a jihad.
I do want to say that in our regular interaction with Muslim communities and Muslim leadership here in Chicago, there's a great deal of pain that is being experienced and that is expressed to us quite regularly, and sadness and sort of disbelief that what is happening in the name of Islam is happening. So I do want to give credit where credit is due. And, you know, there may not have been people taking to the streets about that, you know, really tragic situation in Syria that you reference, but it is something that I hear quite regularly. And I think there's also just a lot of embarrassment and shame. So it's probably a much more complicated situation. Yes, Fuad.
Okay, I personally, I just can't believe that we're in the 21st century and we're still killing each other, and not as religious, as humans. You know, that I can't believe that we're still doing that. The fact that religions are involved in that is doubly shameful to have that. And it has happened in every religion, in every history, all over history. And, you know, genocide has happened. Christianity has had 600 years more to refine the fact of doing genocide and then getting over it and getting rid of the extremists. Islam now is in the final last battle. I think what is happening with ISIS is the last stand of the extremists that hopefully will be marginalized, and that moderate Islam will prevail. And just like Dr. Ibrahim has said, that, you know, an imam can rile the worshippers in the mosque and get them using religion. Everybody has used religion in the wrong way. I can't believe that in this country where democracy has happened for so long, George W. Bush was using religious rhetoric to garner support for the war in Iraq, right? And we have that happening still here. So the whole point is really, you know, like my brother here has said.
Emmanuel.
No, the hippie guy.
The non-Emmanuel.
I'm disappointed.
Emmanuel, if you had your facts about the Quran correctly, I would have supported you, but your facts were wrong. But you know that actually it is about time to use religion for spirituality and for making ourselves better people, like you were saying, Dr. Morar, and stop the power of religion to be abused so that we can, you know, torment and kill each other. Everywhere, everybody's guilty.
I just want to say one more thing. I don't know if it's a coincidence or what, but the truth is all the Muslims are not terrorists. I have to agree, and most people I think will agree with me that all Muslims are not terrorists. However, we all see all the terrorists are Muslims. Now we need some explanation.
The explanation is exactly what Dr. Taimur said. It's a 600 years difference. If we are now in 1400, we would have, or 13 or 12, and we see the Crusaders going to Constantinople and destroying it completely because as the Orthodox, they are not belonging to Rome, and so on and so forth. So now we are seeing the adolescent of political Islam, that they will come to mature, like they happen in Christianity, and there's a 600 years difference, Dr. Taimur saying.
Now, I agree. I mean, if you look at this historically and in a calm, scholarly fashion, the Reformation in Islam has not happened yet, and it may be in the beginning right now. If you go back to the Middle Ages and you go back to the Catholic Church of the Middle Ages, they were burning people at the stake. They called them witches. They were cutting people's heads off. There was all kinds of religious extremism in the name of Christianity. The Crusades themselves were barbaric, and they were done in the name of Christianity. Eventually you had the Reformation, eventually you had revolutions against absolute monarchs, and then things calmed down. I don't think it's going to take 600 years in the Middle East, but you got to give it a few decades before all these contradictions work themselves out, and that's what's going on. And it's not victimizing primarily the Christians. It's victimizing the average citizen in the area, no matter what their religious belief.
I don't know the Christian is left in the Middle East.
No, I do want to just respectfully refute the claim about all terrorists being Muslims. FBI statistics in this country tell us that the vast majority of terrorists or would-be incidents that are caught before the fact are actually perpetrated by white supremacist groups.
Like
and
Timothy McVeigh, and there are a lot of people that have absolutely nothing to do with Islam.
See, the thing that is blamed on Christianity is not the teaching of Christianity. However, those Muslim brothers who are doing this terrorist act are relating their act to their books. So,
as are the ISIL terrorists. They do base themselves
that's
on
what I'm
scripture.
saying. The Christian cannot relate their crime to their books.
Oh yes, they did. The Catholic Church did in the Middle Ages.
I think we have an issue here. Is the books or the teaching of the books? No, teaching of the books. It's not the books. I mean, I can take the Bible and read it in a different way and I'll be a completely different person. And I'm sure my friend can take the Quran and read it and will be a completely different person. So I don't think it is a book. It is the way they teach the book. So fanatism of Wahhabis teaching the book in a different way, ISIS followed that, and that's what they are doing. And if you go to the moderate Sunnis, we lived with them from 1919 to 1952. They were true Muslims, but very tolerant, understanding the book the way it should be understood.
I don't disagree with you, Dr. Kamal. As I said, we have many Muslim friends, and including Sunnis, of course, because majority of people we lived with were Sunnis. We don't have a problem with the Muslims, Sunni. We do have a problem with those Salafis that we talk about. And as the brother said there, the moderate Muslims are not showing any opposition to what's going on, so it's creating more problems.
I know we're scheduled to end at 9, and there's a question that I wanted to pose to Dr. Ibrahim and to Deacon George about an organization that was founded in the past year and a half. It's based in Washington, D.C., called In Defense of Christians, that is working to protect Christian communities in the Middle East. Deacon George is the chair of the Chicago chapter of the organization, and I'd like for the two gentlemen to tell us a little bit more about the activities of In Defense of Christians.
IDC stands for In Defense of a Christian, and this thing was created in the mid-2013, was founded, and our last year summit in Washington, D.C., IDC Summit 2014 was very successful convention, you want to call it, or summit. IDC were able to bring the Christian leaders of all the Eastern Christian churches to Washington, D.C., to put them in one room under one roof, and to find a way to unite these people and to find a solution for the problem. And that is something they were able to do that nobody else was able to do for over 1,600 years, since 410. The other things, really the mission of IDC is protecting and preserving Christianity in the Middle East where it is birthplace. Raising awareness of what's going on in the Middle East, advocating for the right of the Christian in the Middle East. Organizing and mobilizing Christian and non-Christian, that will include Jewish and Muslim brothers, to stand by the Christian, to show support so they can resist what's going on in the Middle East. We also looking for American Christian, not only the Middle Eastern. So far we started it with the Eastern Christian churches that include the Coptic church, the Armenians, the Syriac, Assyrian, Chaldean, all the Christian Antiochian of Middle East. We are trying to get them together, to unite, to find a solution for this problem, because it is another problem. We don't have unity among our Christian brothers. And this event, current event in the Middle East, creating some kind of urgency for this unity. And IDC's goal is to help the Middle Eastern Christian to come together, create unity, be united, bring others into the group, such as the Muslim brothers who are against ISIS, to come and stand by the Christian and support them to stay in the Middle East. We can't ask the Christian to stay in the Middle East while they're getting killed on a daily basis. We have to protect them. So the main goal of the IDC is protecting and preserving Christianity in the Middle East. And we just opened a new chapter in Chicago. I am the chairman of the chapter, and Dr. Kamal is also a member with us in the IDC Chicago chapter. We do have a meeting next Thursday. As a matter of fact, I'd like to take this opportunity to invite everyone to come and join us. Our meeting will be next Thursday, August 13, at 7 o'clock in St. Mary, Antiochian Orthodox Church in Palace Heights. Also, I would like to take this opportunity to invite everyone to our convention. We have our IDC Leadership Convention in Washington, D.C., September 9 to September 11. I also like to invite everyone to attend. Whoever attended last year's summit knows what I'm talking about. It was the most successful summit. It was so nice. We had a chance, everybody had a chance to meet with the Congress, discuss what's going on in Middle East, ask a question. Our religious leaders, the patriarch and the bishops who represented their churches, had the opportunity to meet with the President Obama for 40 minutes to discuss the problem of the Middle East. So it is an opportunity to gather everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think Deacon George covered very well the IDC. I'd like to just introduce to you another organization. It's called Coptic Solidarity. And it's formed about 6 years ago as a grassroots movement between the Copts in diaspora in Europe, US, Australia, etc., Canada. And the aim of the organization is really more Egyptian solidarity than just Coptic. It wants to, or function to increase the awareness of the political situation in Egypt. We were formed when Mubarak was there, and the situation was very bad for Christians. And now we trying to increase the awareness that everybody knows what's going on in Egypt and also what's going on with the Copts. I don't want to leave you with thinking that the situation is rosy for the Copts. That's not true. Government trying, but still we have kidnapping of young girls, converting them. We still having burning churches. We still have killing Christian. We still have forced migration of the farmers out of their land, push them out. And the government is not really up to the bar yet. They are not applying the law fairly. So still we're having problems. But we're very optimistic because the new regime is very open, very supportive. But more important than that, the revolution of 2011 and 2013 brought the moderate Muslims out in support of Christians. So Coptic Solidarity works on all that to increase awareness and to expose what happened there. We support the government when they do something good, but also we expose the bad things that happen. And if you can know about it, go to CopticSolidarity.org, headquartered in Washington, D.C.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ibrahim. And if there are any final words, I know we have to keep this very brief. We want to wrap up. If any of the panelists would like to say some final words, this would be the time.
All I want to say for final word that all this persecution will not discourage us from holding firm to our faith, Christian faith, and to remain attached to our homeland. One of our Syriac fathers said in Aramaic, and I'll translate it in English, I could eat qtal suhde, watfasaq hadom meyhun, tamon egneth, uhkudshu, wabhurbo shaino abdat. It means where marchers have been killed and have had their limbs severed, that is where the Holy Spirit dwell and spread peace in the wilderness. Even if we forcibly compelled to leave our homeland for a time, we should stay connected to our ancestors' homeland, remain faithful to our Christian mission, and transmitting it to subsequent generations, while bearing in mind the words of our Lord, he who endures till the end will be saved, in Matthew 10:22. Thank you, Jamal. Thank you.
Just one word. I would like to congratulate Jamil for a very successful function. It was very well thought of, and I'm sure that will be a beginning of more panels similar to that one. But also I'd like to congratulate you on the choices of the panelists. We presented different views. We had some argument, which is good to make the story clear and obvious and keep the interest of everybody. Thank you very much, and I appreciate it.
So just to give you a little bit of education, Armenians are not the indigenous people of Iraq and of Syria. In fact, these countries in Iraq and Syria and Jordan and Lebanon were our homes for, right after the genocide. So I just kind of want you all to know that. But we do consider the Middle East, part of our culture and our history and part of who we are. And then two, I just want to say there were some generalizations made, and there were a lot of Muslims that actually did save Armenians during the genocide and kept them safe and from out of harm's way. So I just want to put that out there. Thank you, and thank you, Jamil, and to my fellow panelists. You guys are amazing. Thank you.
Dr. Nabil.
I just want to thank everybody for a lively discussion. Thank you so much. Thank you. God bless you.